Hello, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Mid-Table Crisis with me, Tom Patrick.
And me, Simon Cross. So how have you been, Tom? We've been away for a couple of weeks. What have you been up to?
Nefarious deeds, Simon, nefarious deeds. I can't tell you. If I did, I'd have to take your toenails off again. But it's been an interesting time for me and for you, because, there's been a lot of transfer rumours. Not as much activity as I was expecting, to be honest, but it's all kicked off today, hasn't it?
It's literally kicked off today, if you're talking about the Premier League there, Tom. As
Yeah.
I say, we are recording now at 5 o'clock, so we've just had the 3 o'clock kickoffs finish. I've got muted in the background Arsenal versus Crystal Palace at the moment, so I'm, a little bit of multitasking, proving, that men can indeed do it. And we're here to give you our predictions of what we think is going to happen in the Premier League this season. So, with that in mind, Tom, what do you think is going to happen in the Premier League this season?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to talk about is the title contenders. And for me and for everyone else, I think people are looking at the big five, I think you could refer to them as now. Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea and Arsenal. And I think they will occupy the final top five at the end of the season. I think it's going to be a fairly straight fight between Man City and Chelsea in the end, because Man United look like they've improved from last season with Van Gaal. Obviously, they lost today, but I don't think that's going to be the story of their season. But I think it's just going to be a bit too quick for them to roar back up the league. So I think they're going to finish in fifth, Man United, with Chelsea might just pick Man City to the post, or I don't know, Man City might take it, but I think it's going to be definitely those two at the end, and then probably Arsenal third and Liverpool fourth. Looking at their teams, the signings they've made, Arsenal look to have a bit more strength and depth. Still don't think they've got enough, but I think they'll have. I mean, third's good for Arsenal these days. I mean, it's sad to say, but third and maybe a cup would be a good season for them. What about yourself, Simon? Who do you see sneaking the title at the end?
It's a tough one, as you say. We've got. I think you're right in terms of. I think you're right in terms of four of those five will be up there. I'm not quite as convinced. I think Man United's this one. This one's going to be another transitional system. I mean, especially if. I mean, today he started with three at the back. I mean, and ultimately he changed in an attempt to try and improve the way they were playing, but that wasn't fruitful. So we'll see how that happens. I think next 2 weeks are absolutely massive for Manchester United, and whether or not they'll be a top contender will be defined in those 2 weeks and who they bring in. To bring it, going back to title contenders, I think Chelsea and Man City are the big two, are the top two out of that group that you mentioned. I think Mourinho, he's had a season now. He's brought in he's brought in a great midfield signing in Fabregas. He's got Felipe Luis, so that left back position where he was playing Azpilicueta last season. That's now shored up a little bit with a more naturalised left back. Mm-hmm. It comes ultimately down to how one player will make and break Chelsea in this regard, and it's how they get Diego Costa to settle in and get firing.
Yeah.
If he starts firing, that was the one piece of the puzzle they missed last year, and they looked very good everywhere else. I mean, when Eden Hazard is in that team and, is creating and scoring as much as he does, if you actually have an on-form striker in that team, you have to say that they would start picking things up, and I'd say win it. I'm going to go against you a little bit on this one. I think Man City have made some admittedly fine signings. They have strengthened, but I think Chelsea have strengthened also strengthened in key areas, and I think the shortened squad in the Champions League for Man City, the restrictions they're going to be subject to, will also be a factor. I mean, they've got less slots to play with in that, so their players are going to get more tired later on. So I'm just trying to assess the whole situation. So I'm going to go Chelsea top. I'm going to say Man City second. I think Arsenal will run them very close, and Liverpool will run those guys very close. You give a fifth slot, so I'll give a fifth slot as well. I'd fancy Tottenham to make a late charge and maybe even get fifth.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're the kind of team you'd expect to see there. That's realistically where they'd hope to be, I'd say. I mean, they're probably hope for fourth as well, but I mean, that's probably a bit far for them. But yeah, I mean, obviously after the splurge, after Bale's sale last season, their players have had a bit more time to settle in. But I do agree with you about Chelsea. I mean, last season all they were really missing was a top quality striker. I mean, Eto'o was a bit past his best. Demba Ba not quite at that level. And Torres just seemed like about half the player he used to be. So, if Diego Costa has, the kind of season that he had for Atletico, for Chelsea, then that could definitely be a huge difference because they relied far too much on the goals from midfield from Oscar and Hazard and players like that last season. So,
and
yeah.
Lampard's no longer there to add to that tally. I mean, he's now at the rivals. He's at Man City, so... Mind you, I don't think he's going to play as many games there as he did for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think that's more to do with the fact that, it's a long season when you're competing on four fronts, which is what Man City will be doing. So, yeah, I mean, a great player to bring in, experience, a great player to have if, you've got 2 or 3 games in a week sometimes, you're playing on a Saturday, a Wednesday and a Friday, So, yeah, definitely a great addition. Strange one. I wouldn't have thought he went there. He'd have gone there, but no.
Well, it's all down to the fact that he's at that New York FC team, which is under the Man City ownership umbrella. Same reason David Villa's now at Melbourne, because that's the one in the umbrella there. So I think, as I say, it's just to keep them fit before they start this mega franchise out in the US. There's those guys, and there's another one out in Orlando that's being joined next season. So the MLS is getting bigger.
Yeah, the Orlando have got. That's the thing about the new expansion teams in the MLS. There's always big players. If you're out of contract and you're the wrong side of 30, you're a former international player, then that's the go-to destination. David Villa and Frank Lampard, they're 2 prime examples.
Thierry Henry.
Not Thierry Henry did it before. I mean, Tim Cahill went over there as well.
Robbie Keane, David Beckham, the most illustrious one.
Yeah, so I think they are in danger, those teams, I think, of becoming a bit of a dad's army like Newcastle were after Kevin Keegan left. But I think so you've got to be careful with that. I mean, it's fine having a good marquee signing, a player that everyone knows, but then you've got to fill the rest of your team with runners because some of those aging legs can't quite do it anymore. But that's a bit of a side point, really, I suppose.
As I say, age. I mean, I know we've digressed slightly, but I'll take your point of age and bring it back to the top 4. I mean, Liverpool, fairly young squad. Arsenal's youth is well storied. Man City there's not many creaking bones in that squad. But then you've got a couple at Chelsea that are starting. I mean, Petr Cech getting on a little bit. I mean, for a goalkeeper, not so much, but for an athlete, and especially with Courtois in the shadows.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. I mean, we can talk about Man City's situation where Pellegrini says he's got 2 first-choice keepers. Chelsea at the moment, you can't really say, there's not that much between Cech and Courtois, I'd say, considering their competitive season. I mean, Cech is still a very good keeper. I'd say 3 or 4 years ago he was one of the best keepers in the world. Now he's just slightly below that status, I'd say. And Courtois on the up. And he's won the league in Spain. He's playing in the Champions League final, so there's not much between them these days. So it's going to be interesting how that one pans out because it's difficult to keep them both in order. I mean, and we saw how Mourinho's dealt with Lukaku selling him to Everton.
I mean, that's a surprising one. I think problem is with Mourinho, there's no way around it. You've got to keep Torres. If nothing else, so you don't, there's not the tag of how much money is lost on the Torres deal now, and I think he's one of Abramovich's favourites. So you have to play him. Costa you've bought in, you're going to have to play him because you've spent so much money on Costa. I mean, that's the way your team is going to play. And Lukaku just wasn't going to get the game time, and I think he just said, look, either play me or move me, and thankfully Everton were more than happy to shell out a little more than we're used to from Everton as well.
Yeah, I mean, the purse strings have been loosened for Everton and for Arsenal, so it was odd to see. But yeah, I think what happened at the start of last season, obviously Lukaku had a good season at West Brom, and he said, look, either I'm playing or I'm leaving. And Mourinho said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll loan you out to a top, well, not a top Premier League team, but a top 10 Premier League team, and see how you do there. If you do well enough, then when you come back, we'll review the situation. I think that's what's happened. And despite Lukaku scoring a hatful of goals, he's still been told that he's not going to be a first choice striker, so he's left. So yeah, I mean, I think it's got to do with personality as well. I mean, Lukaku's obviously very ambitious, so yeah, he's done the right thing because think of the amount of players whose careers have been ruined by going to Chelsea.
Well, we've seen some players that have left Man City this summer. They're like trying to like rise from the ash. They're trying to rise their career from the ashes, like Phoenix is. I mean, Jack Rodwell springs to mind in that regard. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, always been a fan of Rodwell until he went there, and just never was never going to play. No, it was gonna. He knew he was going to be reduced to substitute appearances and sort of League Cup cameos and that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that he's moved. It could be a really good move for him and for Sunderland.
I mean, like same with Scott Sinclair. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if he's got anything finalised yet. I haven't been keeping too up to date on that one, in all honesty. But there's another one where he moved, and therefore you didn't see too much of him afterwards.
Very little, very little. I mean, a lot of people don't really know who he is anymore. He was at Chelsea, and then he had some good games for Plymouth on loan. Since then, he's been, a bit part player at most. He's not even often on the bench, for Man City. So it's not like he talks about wanting to become a future England player, but I mean, is he going to do that in a championship winning team that he never plays in? I don't think so.
No, it's not likely at all. As I say, so that's in our opinion who the top four will be. I mean, we've gone into a little bit of granular depth as to why we think that will be the case. Do you think? So as I say, so we've covered the top end. I think we'll bookend the Premier League now, and we'll do the bottom three. Now, this one's a lot harder to call, I think, than the top four. I think there's a lot of teams that could slip up and end up back in the Championship at the end of the year.
Yeah, because there's so many variables. I mean, one that I'm going to say that could end up getting me a lot of egg in my face is Crystal Palace, because obviously at the moment they are managerless. Pulis left, I think it was Thursday night, so 2 days before the start of the...
I was going to say late Thursday night, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, probably 10 o'clock or later than that. And Pulis is obviously a very good manager at that level. He knows exactly what to do. So their season is very much going to depend on who they get in and how quickly they get in, and how quickly it all gets sorted there, because that kind of upheaval can be catastrophic for a team. I mean, a new manager coming in isn't always necessarily bad. Look at Pulis last season when he joined, and he dragged them up from a team that had 4 points to a team that ended up finishing 11th, I think. But yeah, so I mean, unless Palace get the right man in and he starts off well, then they could be favourites for relegation very quickly.
I imagine their odds have dramatically reduced in terms of that market since this has happened. I saw someone when the Championship season finished last year. A friend of mine who put something about Hull the previous season. It's like, if Hull stays up, I'll give everyone who favoured this a point. He's made the same claim about Burnley this year, so I think he doesn't fancy Burnley too much. And bless them, they've strengthened, but they don't look... You look at the squad sheet and you don't see a Premier League team.
I was going to say, it's not really a Premier League team, is it?
No.
But you could also say that about QPR. It's a Premier League team from 4 seasons ago, maybe, but not quite so much these days.
Now, you know how hard this is going to be for me to say there about QPR, especially since you're, not slating, but mentioning the age of their team. But they've brought in some young signings. They've brought in Jordan Much, who, maybe a season or two away from defining himself as a Premier League player. Same with Stephen Culker, but he had a great season for Cardiff last year.
Yeah.
So they've brought in they've injected some youth as well. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what Charlie Austin can do in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, he did have a penalty save today. But yeah, they have got some good young players. They've also got Petrasso, who played for Coventry a little bit. He looks like a good player. But what I'm saying is, yeah, they've got those players, but they've also got Rio Ferdinand, David Dunn, Sean Wright-Phillips, Bobby Zamora, great players in their day, but not perhaps the kind of players you want leading, well, scrapping in a relegation battle against the kind of sides that are going to be full of Premier League quality. And I'd say the other problem with them as well is they've only got 3 recognised strikers: Austin, Remy, and Zamora, which is obviously a little bit of a problem. They've got a pretty good midfield, but not necessarily a goal scoring midfield. I mean, Much is a very good player, I would agree. Barton, as much as I dislike him, can still play. Tarapt on his day, Jermaine Jenas, but not exactly full of goals. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on their strikers, and obviously how well the creaking legs and defence hold up. But I think obviously Redknapp's going to do his best to get some players in and do some deals, get some loans in, that kind of stuff over the course of the season.
I think that's one of the things that's exciting many fans about Deadline Day is the prospect of seeing Redknapp back in the Premier League, to see if he does make a move for someone on Deadline Day.
Hanging out the side of his car, talking to journalists. Yeah, but I do think as well that he's gonna. I don't know. You know what it's like with QPR. I think they might end up with too many players, and it all gets a bit silly in the end. They've been relegated before with a squad with good enough players, but
with an astronomical wage budget as well.
Yeah, so that needs to be managed very carefully. Just because you can get the players doesn't mean you always necessarily should. Yeah, you need to. It's more about getting the right players than getting
all the players.
Yeah.
No, certainly it's going to be interesting for QPR. I mean, they're going to be. I mean, I reckon they are going to be in the bottom third of the Premier League table come the end. I'd say, knowing the way I feel about them, whereas all our previous listeners do know by now. I mean, it's been well documented. I'd like to see the project fail there. However, I think Burnley, I hate to say it, will be one of the bottom 3 teams. I'm going to say Leicester's start might be a factor, because if the board panic and sack Pearson, it's going to be hard to turn that one around. I mean, we've seen just as many times that move fail as it has succeed. For every, Gustavo Poyet, there's a Mark Hughes or a Neil, there's a Mark Hughes, then a Redknapp at QPR, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Leicester could do it. They could stay up. I personally think all the other teams around them have had too much experience in recent years of surviving the Premier League. Those that will be struggling, I mean, your West Ham, there's another one, for example, who I think are bottom third this season. They're not going to excite anyone. I mean, West Brom, they got off to a good start today. They managed to, they got into a winning situation after going down, but they lost that at home. I mean, away, I don't think they'd have the same stability. So there's another team. So I'd say, pen and paper in my hand, writing it down, making it more permanent. I'd say my bottom 3, not in the exact order, but Burnley, West Bromwich Albion, and I'm going to say Leicester. Your 3?
I would have to say, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here. I'm going to say Crystal Palace, because I'm assuming that things aren't going to go down that well. QPR, because I'm expecting a bit of a rough one for them. And if I can say one of 2, I'd say either Burnley or Southampton, considering the amount of upheaval they've had. If you push me for one, I'll say Burnley. I mean, a lot of it turns how well is Alan Irvine going to do at West Brom? He needs to settle in quickly there. Same with Ronald Koeman at Southampton.
Yeah, I want to bring you up a little bit on that Southampton one because I definitely don't have them as a team that are going to be struggling. Not they're going to be a team that don't do it as well this season, perhaps. But what makes you think they'll be that low down the table?
Well, basically, Southampton, they've had the heart ripped out of them. Well, no, more precisely, they've had the spine ripped out of them. You know, when you've looked at Southampton last season, you look at the play. Well, look at the players that got into the England squad: Luke Shaw, Ricky Lambert, and Adam Lallana. They're all gone. Also, Lovren's gone. So you know, you're talking about two of your best defenders, your best midfielder, and your best striker. I think Koeman is a very good manager, actually. I mean, it's annoyed me a little bit. I remember someone saying something like, "Oh, who's Ronald Koeman?" When he was at Feyenoord. He's done very well at Feyenoord, and he's also a legend in Dutch football. You know, played for Barcelona. You know, played in the '94 and '98 World Cups. A very, very good player. Bit dirty, but you know, a very good player. And he's managed Schneiderlin quite well because obviously he took to Twitter to complain. Well, he was outraged really. I think he said something like 6 years of a wonderful journey with Southampton because we've been with them since League One, destroyed in an hour, something like that. But I think he's managed to get him back on side. But yeah, basically, my point is Koeman is going to have to do very well. Um, I think any team is going to struggle after such a good first season in the Premier League and then losing the manager and possibly, I'd say, four of their best players. So it's going to be a tough one for them, but I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be okay. Coleman's signings have been pretty decent, I think, and he's a good manager.
I mean, I can see your point where you're coming from with the spine, but they've patched up a few of those holes, I think, with Premier League-worthy players. I mean, Lambert's gone, yes, but you've now got Shane Long in, you know, who's proven to get goals at this level, especially with the midfielder's going to have behind him now. Yes, Luke Shaw's gone, but they've got in Ryan Bertrand, you know, a damn fine Premier League left-back. Not as big a star of the future as Shaw will be, but around, I'd say, not, you know, about the same level now as Shaw is, so that's a bit like for like in that regard. I mean, yeah, you're not going to get the long-term benefits. And Dusan Tadic, a player I like a lot, he's now there. So, I mean, I know Lallana was more of a central player. I mean, he had a bit of a free role, and Tadic is more of an out-and-out winger in my eyes. But they've spent the money they've got wisely, and they've still got a lot left over. And let's not forget, there are 2 weeks left.
There are 2 weeks left, and that's why I said I don't think they'll go down, but I think it might be a long season for them. I think they'll probably end up 15 or below, but I don't think they'll end up. It might be one of those ones on the last day that go down, but Burnley more likely, unfortunately, as much as I like Burnley. I mean,
I'll tell you what, based off the back of that Jermaine Defoe one, I'm going to call it right now. I will bet you 10 of the Queen's English pounds that Southampton do not finish 15th, no, lower than 15th. Are you that confident about it?
What happens if they finish 15th?
Let's see. So, if they finish 15th, because you said they'd be they'd said to finish lower than 15th. So, if they finish 15th, I win. 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, or 20th, you win.
So 15th and above, you win.
I'll tell you what. I'll let you have 15 as well.
Okay, that's fair enough. I've got no problem with that. I mean, I still owe you tenner for the...
You haven't paid up on the Jermaine Defoe one yet? No, you haven't.
Well, I haven't seen you.
That's true, yeah. Unfortunately, our...
You've been gun running in the south of France, well, that's what I heard.
I told you not to mention that.
Well, yeah. You're not going to get caught not wearing that new face of yours. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I've got nothing against Southampton. I actually like Southampton a lot because what they've done is what I think clubs should do. You know, the players that were getting in, they weren't paying loads of money for. English players mainly as well. And they've come up from League One and taken the lead by storm.
With a damn fine youth academy as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And unfortunately been plundered. So I do hope to do well, and I do hope they stay up. But I just think with my football head on, they are going to struggle a little bit. And I've got to mention Swansea as well. Swansea, I reckon, will be in around that mix down there. Gary Monk had a fairly decent season last season, and he's got off to a good start today. But even so, I think it's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, Swansea. I think you're right. Will be in and around like that region, but I think they've got a top quality up front, which I look at many of the other teams we've mentioned. I don't see it there as much as I do as I see it in Swansea. When you've got Wilfred Boney and Rafatimi Gomez,
Mm-hmm.
I think I just got him. It's Baffety. When they've got Gomez, you see where I'm coming from in that regard, and they've got a damn fine midfield like for that part of the table. Defence, yes, a little bit, but they've got Michel Vorm as well, so they've got a strong structure and two cracking strikers. Whereas Burnley, Leicester, West Brom even, you can't really say that about.
Well, West Brom, what they have got is Saido Berahino, something like that. He looked like a good player last season. He did drop off a bit, but he's already got two today.
I was going to say, leading the Golden Boot.
He's going to be someone to contend with. I think can't rely on him too much, but if he stays, then he should be worth at least 15, 20 goals this season, I'd say.
We saw flashes of him last season. He was mentioned briefly for the England squad, but of course it was the year when we'd already qualified last season, and we were looking at those players. He stayed in the under-21s, which I think was the right move for him in that regard, and because certain players are ready when they're young, and certain players just aren't, and do need a long time to mature. I mean, Luke Shaw, I think, will have benefited from the experience at 2014. Because he did get some game time. I mean, I think the only reason he did get that game time is because that game didn't really mean too much to us anymore. But there you are. So, I mean, he'll be a prospect for the future, but I just don't think he's enough to stop West Brom from worrying.
They've definitely got to worry. As I say, Alan Irvine's come in, and he's not managed at Premier League level before, so that's always a bit of a risk. So you've just got to hope that they'll have enough about them, and they are used to a relegation scrap. I reckon they'll actually be okay, but yeah, it's not going to be easy for any team down there. It's not going to be easy for probably. As you say, there's probably 8 or 9 teams that are definitely going to be worrying about that this season.
As I say, some of which we've not mentioned, but fans may also think about.
Villa.
Stoke or Villa, for example. I mean, they played each other today.
Actually, can we talk about Stoke a little bit? I mean, they've got Bojan Kirkic, and now they've signed Victor Moses on loan. I reckon they could be a bit of a surprise package. I'll be honest, Stoke aren't usually my favourite team, but they're actually signing some exciting players. Bojan Kirkic, obviously he was at Barcelona, and that's not an easy team to get into, and he did score some goals and play quite a few games for them.
Did he only cost $3 million as well?
He didn't cost much. I think he was at the end of his contract. He didn't have much left to see out, and obviously that kind of money means very little to Barcelona, because I wouldn't say it's not like he's a bad player. It's just that the kind of players he was going up against were players like Pedro and obviously Messi and Neymar are already in the team, so he's not quite at that level. But what he is an exciting player, a technical player that Stoke have been lacking a little bit. So it's going to be very interesting to see him in the Premier League. If he stays fit, I'm predicting a good season for them. And of course, Victor Moses as well. He's shown what he can do. He's a very effective player on his day. So
he get a lot of game time at Liverpool last year. I think he'll get the game time he needs at Stoke.
Yeah, it was annoying because when he did play, he looked effective. I think he is a bit of a confidence player to a certain extent, but I think he can cause a lot of damage. He's quick. He's got a decent finish on him. He can play out wide or up front. He's a very dangerous player for a team like Stoke. So yeah, I think they'll do pretty well.
I mean, yes, I'd say that's not a bad reckoning for surprise package. Mine's a little bit different, and I don't know if everyone will call it a straight surprise, but I think the players they've signed will mean they have a significantly improved performance. May not be immediately straight away, especially with the first game they've got, but I'm going to say Newcastle. Sim de Jong and Remy Cabella? Cabella?
Cabela, I think it is.
Cabella. I think those are two very good players that plug two holes they've had for quite a while. I mean, not every single problem solved there. Their defence, the first line of their defence is good, but it's worryingly thin in terms of backup. I mean, Pardew's attitude to Ben Arthur as well. Apparently, he didn't turn up in the best of shapes for pre-season, but given what his squad number, I think he's trying to move him out. If they move him out and get a fair bit of money for him in the next 2 weeks and spend that wisely, as they often do, to get a creative force in to, replace him, I think they could have a far better season than they did last time round.
Yeah, they're not a bad side by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's just, the end of their season was ridiculous. They've just got to keep their focus. I mean, 'cause towards the end they really did struggle. Obviously, there was a whole headbutt thing, and they knew they weren't going to get relegated. Knew they weren't going to get Europe, so it just sort of petered out. This season, there needs to be focus on getting as many points as possible, building something, because they've not for a while they've not looked like doing anything apart from just being sort of fairly like a mediocre mid-table team, which Newcastle should strive for more.
The fan base they've got the structure there to be more than what they're being at the moment. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, they should at least be the Tottenham of the North, mixing it with the big boys just outside of the top four, top five, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, they should definitely be part of that discussion instead of what they are, which is a bit of a up and down team over the last few years.
Their consistency's really been lacking, in terms of finishes and stability. As I say, there's a lot. The headbutt's one thing. The owner. Well, every now and again it flares up with the owner, and is he spending the money wisely? Whenever they sell a big player, is he spending that money wisely? The whole situation there. I mean, thankfully, the whole Kinnear chapter, I think, has been closed. So there's one less problem off their books in that regard. So who knows? They've quietly signed those like people. They've spent their Debussy money. They've bought in Jan Matt to replace Debussy. So they've what they've lost, they've bought back in another way. So they're not any worse off than they were before, at least. And Cabela is a good player. Sim is, I think, the better one of the De Jong brothers. So, they won't be as disastrous as Luke De Jong's loan was there towards the tail end of last season. So I think that they're in line to make a significant improvement in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they'll do okay. I wouldn't expect them to do maybe quite as well as you're predicting, but I think they'll finish top half. I don't think they'll really trouble the top six. And I just think this season Tottenham, obviously the big five that I mentioned, Tottenham and Everton are going to be too good, and probably Stoke as well making up that. And so it's going to be difficult for anyone to really make much difference to that, I'd say.
Yeah, I suppose in that regard, I can see why you'd go down that route. As I say, well, we don't always agree on things here, so I can see your counterpoints there, and I accept them. So we've talked about surprise packages enough, and covered who we think will ignite the Premier League. Let's turn the focus a bit more back on ourselves. So I think Bolton Wanderers, if I could start off with my team, they're in line to, I think, sadly, I don't think we've made the necessary signings we needed to make. I mean, for obvious reasons, our finances are not brilliant, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think with the addition of Joe Mason, thankfully, we've finally got a little bit more firepower up front, which means we won't struggle, but we won't shoot through the league and blow everyone away. I
Yeah,
think we'll stabilise this season,
yeah.
and I think very slowly we're cutting our cloth more to suit our needs, which we weren't doing in the Premier League so much.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with any relegated team is you're going to have big wage bill. Still going to have the big earners on long contracts that aren't necessarily going to want to leave um, if they can't get a better deal. Because if you are relegated, there's probably a reason for that. And some like for example, we've seen some players being signed up, some ex-Fulham players being signed up, but some of Bolton's players have stayed and kept collecting big wage packets, and they're gonna they're being moved on these days. So yeah, I think it's going to be a consolidation for you, making sure your wage bill suits, and then you can make a push next season probably.
Mm.
So you don't count yourself in amongst the contenders for promotion to the Premiership this season then?
Oh no, definitely not. I mean, I think we may. I'm hoping top half, and it's sad to say, but that'd actually be a good season in my eyes. Teams to go up in that regard, I think Derby. That'll please a few listeners of our show.
Yeah.
I saw them play in pre-season. They had a good run. They've not got quite firing just yet in terms of the championship, but they'll get there, I believe, and I think they'll put a nice run together. And a lot of people are tipping them for automatic. I think even if they end up in the playoffs, they'll have the structure to get through. I take a look at the rest of the league table. I think I'd like to see. I'd like to see Norwich do well. I think that out of the three teams that have gone down, they're going to have the least turbulence behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So if they get their act together, they might get into the playoffs and make a push from there. Cardiff, a good side. I mean, they had a lot of very good Championship players in the Premier League last season and just didn't. Well,
there was a lot of problems there.
There was a lot behind there that wasn't necessarily the players' fault, which didn't help matters. So they'll be up and about there. I think if I had to, gun to my head, I think Nottingham Forest have made the right signings. I think they're going to be a strong contender to push up and might sneak an automatic spot. They'll definitely be in the top 6, but they're one of my tips that will go up. Derby, I think, will go up by hook or by crook. Surprise package, I'd say Middlesbrough, if they make one or two, they're one or two players away from being a really nice team to come from left field and just they're the kind of team that would sneak in on the last day of the season and win the playoffs.
There's always one in the Championship. There's always one that sneaks into the playoffs.
And as I say, I think that's where mine lies, in Middlesbrough.
Yeah, I mean, Aitor Karanka, I think he's a good manager. Last season was probably a season too much for him, but this season, yeah, definitely. They're a good side in general. They've made some good signings, and they've got a quality manager at that level. So, yeah, I would agree with that. And in fact, I definitely agree with Derby. I mean, very, very unlucky to miss out last season. Norwich do look good. I think, as you say, of the relegated teams, Norwich, I'd say yes. Fulham, perhaps, and Cardiff, probably no for me. So I'd say there's going to be Norwich and Derby fighting out for the title.
I reckon Wolves have a chance of making it back-to-back promotions.
It's a big jump. I think if they do it, they'll do it through the playoffs. Because they were cream in League One, but they really should have been with their players. So yeah, I mean Watford, they have got some very good players there, and of course they've missed out in recent years as well.
Trouble is with Watford, you never know what Watford you're going to get.
Yeah, you never know what Watford you're going to get. From our own Forest Gump of football. I agree, but with Troy Deeney in that side, he always seems to score goals.
If he'll stay in that side. I mean, Hull have got Shane Long money to spend, and I think they already have tried to make a bid for Deeney.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting one. If he does stay, then I would say they're going to be in the top 6 most of the season. So, yeah, one of the above, any one of the above, as well as Norwich and Derby.
Well, as I say, I'm not going to pin you down to specific promotion because the championship is just.
Yeah, I mean, predicting the championship's virtually impossible. That's why we've seen back-to-back promotions from teams. You don't see that in League One.
Sometimes you see back-to-back relegations. It's possible if the team cuts their cloth too much.
Yeah, I mean, look at Portsmouth. I mean, obviously that was a bit of a freak situation, but it has happened. And big clubs do go down there, so always difficult. I mean, Birmingham City barely survived last season, so yeah, I mean, big club like that.
It's possible. It's possible. So, with all the chaos of the championship, are we likely to see Coventry in it next season, or is that going to be a little bit too much?
I think that's going to be a little bit too much, to be honest, mate. As good of a squad, as good squad additions that we've had, I think last season we were fired at the start by the fact that we had Leon Clark and Callum Wilson up front scoring goals left, right and centre. Clark left, Wilson got injured, and now they're both gone. Wilson scoring a few goals early on for Bournemouth, which was nice to see, and it got Mark Robins sacked from Huddersfield, who was our ex-manager, so that was nice.
That's crazy, though, after one game. I mean, obviously there was not the best winning record at the time, but still, you'd think you'd have done it. I just don't get why you did it then. I mean,
there's got to be things going on behind the scenes.
I mean, Crystal Palace, mutual consent. You can see that both parties just agreed to, to separate their ways. I mean, that's not an out-and-out sacking, but I don't know, doing it after one game, do it before if you're going to do it. That's the way I see it.
That was apparently mutual consent, but I'd probably say that was more like, he was just jumped before he's pushed, really. They said, look, this isn't really, this isn't going very well, is it? And then they were like, he just agreed to it. So, yeah, I'd say back to the Coventry point, the fact that we did lose two of our best strikers was a big loss, but we've got some good players in. I don't think we're going to be consistent enough. I think we're going to be sort of doing our usual thing of winning 4 or 5 games in a row and then going 3 or 4 without scoring. So ending up somewhere in the middle, which is fine for me, really, as long as we get back playing at the Rico, and there is more and more talk of that. So if we can do that this season and just avoid relegation by a decent margin, then I'll be happy.
I was just about to ask you about that. What you think the chances are of the Rico move happening, and what factor you think it would have how beneficial it would be to the performance of the team if it was to happen. So, do you what if you could put a percentage figure on it? How likely is it that you're going to be at the Rico by the end of this season?
I'd probably say 50-50, to be honest, because there's been a lot more talk about it. I know Ian Wallace said he was 80% sure that we would be playing there this season. Ian Wallace is a Scottish forward who played for us for a long time in the 70s. I would say that's quite optimistic. If it had happened, it would have happened by now. I know talks are ongoing, but there's a decent chance for a change. It's gone from people just hoping against hope to stuff's actually being done. There's been more talk of it in the newspapers than usual, and the right kind of people are saying the right kind of things. But still, unless I won't believe it till the 89th minute of the first game. So,
I think it's one of those that I think it'd definitely be a great homecoming if it was to happen.
Oh, definitely.
In terms of the noise from the ground, perhaps I'd be able to hear it all the way over here in Leicester, but you never know.
No, I mean, Presley did say the other night, I think it was the game against Bradford that we lost 3-2. He said, if that was played at the Rico, maybe that would have been the difference. But who can say? Who can say? But yeah, in general, I'm not forecasting a bad season for Carl. Great manager, decent team, a lot of good young players, bit inconsistent, and yeah, as long as we can just avert relegation and keep the books balanced, we'll be happy.
I think we're both we've both got the same mindset in that regard. I think we just want gradual improvement. We're not expecting the moon and the stars, but we're hoping that better times will eventually prevail.
Yeah, I mean, both our clubs haven't got that much money in comparison to a lot of others, so that's all we can really ask for, to be honest.
Yeah, and I suppose we're not going to fade away to be one of those forgotten teams, but we always have those moments, especially when watching Soccer Saturday on on the afternoon, on an afternoon like today, where you see a name flash up on the video printer and go, I hadn't heard of him for years, and that leads us to one of the new segments that we're looking to introduce. Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about that, Tom?
Well, what specifically would you like me to talk about?
Well, as I say, we've got a brand new segment that we'd like to introduce to Mid-Table Crisis, and it's something that I thought you'd be quite excited about. What with your your far-reaching knowledge of the obscure?
Yeah, I thought you meant talking about a little bit more about the whole concept behind the idea. But yeah, basically, what we're going to be doing every week, we're going to be looking at those players that you remember only when you sort of see their name or you hear something, you just like, what happened to him? They're the players that maybe had one or two moments in their career that that's the only thing you remember about them. It's not like years of great football. It's just that one moment that you just think, oh, that's going to define his entire career. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. It might be scoring, the winning goal in a cup or an important game, or it might be a famous miss or a famously bad challenge or something like that. But it's going to be looking at the nostalgic days of the cult footballer. And I mean, there's plenty that we can go at, but your suggestion was a very good one, Simon. What was that?
As I say, yeah, as I say, I did see him today on the video printer, and I was just like, I can't believe he's still going, and he's at a club. It's Chris Iwelumo, who most people remember for his famous miss playing for Scotland from 2 yards out with an open goal. He's now plying his trade at Chester, where today he managed to get himself on the score sheet. So perhaps without the international pressure on his shoulders, he's got a bit more of a predatory instinct in the box these days.
Oh, you talk about international pressure. He only actually ever played 4 games, and yeah, I mean,
to be fair, with a miss like that, you can see why.
Yeah, I don't think he got in the team till he was well into his 30s anyway. So
it was a strange time for Scotland. I think there was a bit of an injury crisis at the striking with the strikers, and they never really got. I don't know. I think they were just clutching at straws. I think it was the same time they were looking at Kevin Davis for a call-up.
Yeah, you've got to talk about as well the fact that it is Scotland, and Scotland these days, back then as well, it's on such a low ebb. Gone from having such great players like Ali McCoist and Gary McAllister playing for them, to sort of like getting anyone in that's just sort of like half Scottish or like got Scottish ancestry.
Or once
Ireland
bought a tin of shortbread.
Yeah, Ireland do that very well. Ireland get the right kinds of players in. I mean, Chris Iwelumo, was he really ever going to be a top quality striker for them, or was he just going to be a stopgap? I mean, you've got to say what was going on there. I mean, I do remember seeing there's YouTube footage as well. I might put it on the Facebook page of 2 Scottish commentators famously talking about that miss. They thought he'd gone in. They were talking about his first goal for Scotland. It was one of his first games. It was amazing, and now, of course, looking back at it is very funny because it takes them probably about 45 seconds, I'd say, to realise that it actually hasn't gone in. They will have to watch the replay twice. So yeah, it was unbelievable, really. It was an open goal. It's one of those ones where it was easier to score, really, wasn't it?
I was going to say, it's actually sort of impressive that he missed because, the angle he gets on it is unbelievable. I mean, we will have to put it up just to refresh people's memories, but it's a sight to behold when you see it.
Mm. And what I didn't realise about him as well is that he's actually quite well travelled, considering he's basically a bit of a English league journeyman. He's also plied his trade as far afield as our house, which is in not our house as in the house that I currently live in. It's in Denmark. So he's started quite well there actually in '98. And then he tailed off towards the end. He ended up getting 4 in 27. But he's never really set the world alight, which makes you ask why he was called up for Scotland. But he also played for a little bit in Germany for Alemannia Aachen. But he never really did that well there as well. In fact, he didn't score a goal. Probably his best years, you'd have to say, were either at Colchester or Wolves. Colchester, he got a goal-scoring record of better than 1 in 3, and Wolves is where he caught the eye really of Scotland, because he was playing in a decent league. I think he was Championship and then Premier League for a short while. Correct me if I'm wrong.
He was in the Premier League. He never scored in the Premier League by the looks of things.
Yeah, I think he was with them when they got promoted, but he
just wasn't that kind of player.
No. He wasn't a Premier League player. I mean, he was a big target man. He could do a job in the Premier League, but that goal wouldn't have been scoring goals.
No.
So, yeah, after that, he went to Burnley and Watford, and since then he's sort of been winding down a little bit with spells at Scunthorpe and St Johnstone, and now at Chester. So, yeah, obviously he's dropped quite a bit. He is 35. But it's good to see him get on the scoreboard. A bit nostalgic for you there.
As I say, bless him. He's one of those players, who just got off. It's interesting that we mentioned it was one of his 4 games. It was actually his first game. It was his debut when he had the miss.
Oh dear.
And it was a game. It was a qualifier against Norway, which did finish 0-0. So
could have made a huge difference.
It could have made a massive impact. Well, I'm not saying they would have gone. I don't think they had that great a record. But you never know. It might have sparked something.
Yeah, he was a lot like a Scottish Emil Heskey, but he never really got the games.
So here's to you, Chris Alumo. I hope you have a great time out there at Chester. I know we've poured a little bit finally over your famous miss, but that's not to torture you. It's just that is how you're defined, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I know I spoke to him earlier. Obviously, he's an avid listener to the show, and I mentioned it we'd be mentioning him, and he was fine with it. He said he doesn't mind a bit of ribbing. He's a good sport. Bless him.
So, as I say now, listeners, you have had a little bit of an insight into our minds and the way we're thinking about this season of the Premier League. I mean, obviously, in the future, we're soon going to be covering the end of the transfer window, and all manner of things that will go on in what I'm sure will be another chaotic season of English football. So, with that in mind, this has been Mid-Table Crisis. I have been, will be, and will always continue to be Simon Cross.
I've been Tom Patrick. Thank you very much, Simon. I've had a lovely time, and I hope all the listeners have too.
All right. Have a great day, listeners. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.